Welcome, everybody. Hello, coming at you live from New York. This is Spirit Matters, your daily spiritual check-in with the Bhakti Center. That's how I've been referring to this. I think it's how we've been referring it to since day one, just not officially. Your daily spiritual check-in, just to make sure that we're doing okay, see how we're doing, get a little spiritual wisdom and insight into our life, and just do a little pulse check because we need checking in on. I was a friend of mine, in Tennessee was sending me a message yesterday saying how they listen every day, but sometimes they like to let a few episodes they like to get behind a few episodes so they can binge a few all at once. A little guilty pleasure. So if you're out there listening, you know who you are. You know that we love you. How you guys doing?
I'm doing okay. I'm trying to stay with my spirits high because my body hasn't been doing so well. I got sick, then I was healthy. Then I got sick again, then I kind of got healthy. Now I think I'm getting I don't know what's happening, but I'm here and I'm happy. The weather is kind of crazy. I'm trying to remember that verse from Bhagavad Gita. Like the winter disappears into the summer. The senses are also ever disappearing into each other. So trying to keep my spirits high, even though some body issues. How are you, Achita?
I am currently being held together with the Band-Aid of God's mercy.
Yeah, that's exactly how I feel.
And NyQuil. Well, God bless you guys. I feel like I'm doing great now. Listen to that.
I didn't say that was a bad thing. I said I was being held together with the Band-Aid of God's mercy. I didn't say it was bad.
Yeah, and I said my spirits are high, just my body is like whatever. So
great. Well, now I'm in the dumps. I realize I'm not doing so great. Thank you for that clarification. This is the first time the three of us are back together in a little while. And we're reading Bhagavad Gita. Yesterday we picked off verse 35. Did we read verse 35 yesterday? I remember we were talking for a while. Did we read verse 30? Kimberly, did we read verse 35 yesterday?
We did, yeah.
Verse 35 read, as a recap, it is far better to discharge one's prescribed duties, even though faultily, than another's duties perfectly. Destruction in the course of performing one's own duty is better than engaging in another's duties, for to follow another's path is dangerous. It's a little bit dangerous. Do we want to recap on this first? Because it's a big one. Or do we want to move on?
I think it's such a big one.
It's such a big one.
How many times does God actually say something is dangerous?
Listen, that's pretty dangerous
I
over there.
actually think it's kind of worth us stopping and be like, oh wait, God literally said this was dangerous.
Danger.
Let us
danger.
Reflect. And we
all right, go for it. Tell me. Give it to me. Give me the spiritual wisdom.
I feel like we didn't hear anything from Kishore yesterday. I was at a loss,
It's not a feeling, it's a reality. We didn't. We did not hear anything from
him. I was not here yesterday. But I really like this verse. It's one of my favorite verses. And I think it's really, I'll try not to go too down a path of society and politics because I don't want to go there right now. But I think it's a really nice verse. Chita's do it. I think it's a really nice verse to remind us that bhakti is so unique. And it's such a really beautiful spiritual practice because it's like a reminder. Krishna is saying here, there's kind of this almost like an injunction, an instruction here, and it's danger and it's real intense. But I like to look at it as wow, my relationship with Krishna is extremely unique. This thing that I have with God, with Krishna, is extremely unique, and he's kind of warning me nicely. He's kind of warning me nicely, don't try and pretend to be someone else. you know, like don't try and pretend to like do something else that is not meant for you. And I think it's really important to hear these kinds of verses, especially like when you're going, or at least the message of these kinds of verses when you're like going through it, or when you're comparing yourself to others, um, or you're comparing yourself to some sort of, you know, societal standard that we're supposed to be at. And it's like this idea sometimes that like fate or things happen for a reason, or it's Krishna's plan. I mean, to be very honest, that can sometimes be like, sometimes you hear that and you're like, yes, everything is happening for me and Krishna, and oh my God, amazing. But at least for me, sometimes I hear that and I'm like, really? Like, is it actually all happening for me? Because I do not feel like that right now, you know. And when things get tough, like really, really tough, and there's suffering going on, it's hard to sometimes feel or embody like, yeah, this is a specific story, this is a specific journey that I have to take to get closer to Krishna. And so I think these kinds of verses are really beautiful reminders, actually, that's coming straight from Krishna's mouth, of like, hey, like actually you're doing fine, and you're supposed to be what you're supposed to be doing, and you're not supposed to be like anyone else. And even though it like might be intense right now, like it's okay, you're on your own path. And I've always found this verse to be so hopeful, actually, because it's just like, oh yeah, I don't have to like pretend to be that other person. I don't have to like measure myself up to these crazy standards of other people, you know, like I'm accepting where I'm at right now. But yeah, that's what I have to say about that.
At least with God, which I also find equally comforting, is when like God sits you down and he's like, okay, real talk. Here's the tough stuff. It's actually dangerous for you not to be yourself. Which is what our parents have been trying to hopefully, maybe, possibly in some way help us with a little bit. But also simultaneously, it's like you get taught two opposing truths at the same time. It's like be yourself, also be someone else to fit in with every single other group at school, but also be yourself. And so I can understand why children are confused, because you send them out into the world every day and you're like, just be yourself, except not like that. Be yourself in some other person's way. And here Krishna is pretty much in no uncertain terms making it really clear, hey, spirit soul, it's really dangerous to not be who you are. And we spoke a little bit about that yesterday. And I you brought up so many beautiful points. Um, there was one that I was thinking about, and I was like, to that end. And then I lost the end. The end is
They were
gone.
speaking about it yesterday, like a point that Kishore just made, or a point that we made yesterday.
No, Kishore just made a point that was like really sweet, and I was like, you know, I want to make a point about that point. And then I
Was it
lost.
about being hopeful, or Krishna having a very specific, unique relationship with us, or being down in the dumps and suffering and reminding ourselves that
That was the one, dumps and suffering. That's where I started off.
this is all a part of our story.
Oh, right. I remember now.
Yes.
Um, when you were saying that it was difficult to remember when we're in the midst of the thing, in this stuff, and um, I was speaking to my sister yesterday, and we were talking about faith and faith in Krishna consciousness, and I was just kind of saying that there was one incident, and it wasn't like a happy incident. It was one of those like really wonky, scary kind of incidents where you start to realize that some of the harsher truths in the Vedas are really true. Like, hellish planets, that sort of thing, right? And I was telling her, I was like, that for me was actually all I needed to believe conversely that everything about Krishna was true. And she was saying, she's like, she's like, I never really thought about it like that. Like, there was a situation, we had a family member, distant relative, this is a long time ago, who was passing away, and they got a glimpse of some people who did not look very spiritual. And they asked my mom for her neck beads, her kantimala, her tulsi neck beads. And they were quite like really upset, afraid, the whole thing. And my mom was kind of like, oh no, the not the wrong people are here, you know. It's like it's literally like watching the ajamil happen out of Srimad Bhagavatam. And so she took off her neck beads in one heroic devotee move, gave them to the relative, and everything subsided. That relative later passed away when my mom wasn't there, because she came back later with Ganga water and Nishringa pujas and all kinds of stuff, because that's my mom. But for a long time, I took that. I was like, that is my sign. You know, you ever wonder, is this all real? You know, I've read a lot of things, and it can seem a little far-fetched and out there in reality. Could this all be actually happening? And then you have a situation like that, and you're like, well, that's real. But for me, it wasn't just that the difficult things are real. For me, that was my beacon that also all of the best things are real and ready and waiting. So this verse, when we're thinking about it, and it's like, oh, everything's happening for me, and it's hard to believe in the tough times. And I want to remind myself not to get stuck in just the belief that only the worst things are true. If they're true, then also the best things are true. Everything that Krishna has promised us, told us, asked us to just rely on him for, it's all true. And I was reflecting on how often we, society, but me specifically, can get stuck on, 35 people can say something amazing about you all day, but the one person who gives you that constructive like criticism, hey, I think you should be a little bit more like so and so. We let all the other 35 comments roll off our back, and we cling desperately to the one negative thing. Like, what? But why can't I change their mind? But if we're going to believe that that's true, why not also believe those other 35 people? So it's reminding me to believe Krishna in all circumstances. That yes, the sorrow comes, the desperate times arrive. But just as we've seen those desperate times, then that should give us faith that the rest is also true. Not just that only this part is the part we cling to that is true. So when you were talking about how life was working for us, and this verse can be a beacon of hope, I was kind of reflecting on, you're right. I want to remember that all of it is true.
We can't hear you.
I was muted. Why? Now you're muted, Achita. Why? Okay, everybody. Why is it so much easier to believe the negative things than the positive things? Like, it just seems so much easier. Somebody says, you know what, that stunk. You're like, yeah, I really do stink. Someone's like, you're amazing, and it's like, doesn't stick quite the same way. Why is it so much easier?
I think it's because deep down we're already thinking that about ourselves. We don't always have the best faith in ourselves. And the people that do have the best faith in themselves, they actually refuse to believe the negative things people say. But then that becomes vilified in society, right? If you're not able to simply just accept whatever horrible thing I've said to you and take it as the criticism that you need in your life, then you're a delusional person who can't quite seem to see outside of themselves. But it doesn't have to be one or the other. And it doesn't always have to be that when someone gives us a constructive criticism, we still have to consider the source. They may not know us at all. They may know nothing about us. They may not, like, but way deep down inside, sometimes we are already thinking that about ourselves. And so things come up and affirm what we were already thinking. It's like that, sometimes we are not afraid of failure. We're afraid of what happens if it all goes well. What happens if it all succeeds? Because we are constantly waiting for the other shoe to drop, waiting for the distress. We are always on the lookout. Like, I know it's coming. I just know that this day can't really be that good. And then the minute something bad happens, you're like, see, I knew this day couldn't really be that good. But it also is just a few minutes in the day. We could always have the choice to say, okay, that happened, and this day is still good. I have the choice to say, I'm being held together by the band-aid of God's mercy. No, so it's not a bad thing.
That's
Like,
a good thing.
it's just a truth. How am I? I'm being held together by God's mercy. And that's actually an amazing thing. To know a merciful supreme person is the most amazing thing that could ever happen to me, regardless of what my body's doing, what my mind's doing, whatever the case is. But sometimes we're already secretly thinking, yeah, but it's not that good. Like, and then that energy makes itself known. And so I think that it's interesting for us to take a pause sometimes and see and reflect about our responses when people tell us things. Now, is this actually something that can help me, or was this a fear that I already had? That I was just waiting. Somebody was going to call me out for it, and now they've caught me. And I've been an imposter the entire time. Maybe you haven't. Maybe you haven't. And maybe both are true. Maybe the people who came up to you and said that whatever it was wonderful is actually wonderful. And maybe tweaking one or two things doesn't take away from how wonderful you are. And maybe you consider the source and realize that you don't have to tweak anything.
I'm thinking of this verse in Srimad Bhagavatam in Canto 11. I don't remember what chapter, but it says that fear arises in the living entity because we turn away from God. That's that simple in a sense. Like, and therefore the cure to that is that we have to turn towards God. And then I think the verse says something around like fear. Oh, because we begin to, I was like reciting the Sanskrit in my head to remember. We begin to identify, once that fear has arisen, because we've turned away from God, we begin to identify with the human body and with this material world. And so I think that that's actually a really important thing to your question, Doyal, because it's like, I always think that when I guess I always realize that like when I am in those places of really thinking bad stuff about myself, or really thinking like that one negative comment that person made, that's just ruined my whole week and everything. And I really believe that after I get through whatever that is, I realize like, yeah, that is a story that I'm telling myself. Like that doesn't define who I am. That's not actually who I am. The feelings that arose around that are not who I am. That's not who I am. And at least in my daily practices, in my daily life, I've realized that when I feel insecure or bad about myself or fearful about like the world, I realize it's because I'm not taking enough shelter of God. I'm not taking enough shelter of Krishna. And it's kind of a nice litmus test, that verse, I think, because it's like, okay, how much am I really, like really, capital R, taking shelter? Like, how much am I really giving myself to this process and really giving myself to Krishna? Or how much am I not? Like, what cards am I holding close to me? And like, I don't know, Krishna, I don't know if I'm going to let you see this card or not yet, because I'm still a little too afraid to like put all the cards on the table, And so I've always found that to be very nice and confronting in a good way, and like simple. It's like, okay, the more I'm really in my practices, and there's I also think that that's not what's the word I'm looking for, that's something that is not like super measurable. It's like, I can be checking all the boxes on my spiritual, this is what it looks like to look spiritual checklist. It's something that really has to be like an honest conversation with yourself. Like, how much am I really in this? How much am I really believing in Krishna? And yeah, that helps me with not believing or the stories in my own head and stuff like that.
And I think this question brings up um, kind of an answer that I've sort of needed for a long time, which is how we combine or come to grips with pure devotees looking at their karma and saying, I know I've deserved worse, but Krishna has given me the best. And we hear of this example, and this is supposed to be the path of perfection. And I always kind of wondered, like, how, how? And it's exactly what we're speaking about today. Realizing that, okay, I'm being held together right now, and that's actually not a bad thing. It's understanding that the situation that I'm going through is not the end. And even if it is the end, Krishna's waiting on the other side. It's this trust. Are we developing enough trust in the good things to not have one, bad comment or doubt come and rip it all away? Because the doubts will come, even in our spiritual practice. Do we trust our spiritual practice enough? Do we trust in what they've told us? Do we believe, actually? We've signed up for a spiritual practice, but do we believe and do we trust it? So that when other things, outside things come, it's not ripping up to shreds our spiritual fortitude, because it will happen. And I've always likened it to saying, you tell somebody, okay, Doyle, I can't be friends with you. And it's like, well, why? It's like, well, because me and Kishore got into it. You're like, yeah, but you and Kishore got into it. Like, that doesn't have anything to do with me. It's like, yeah, but you're friends with Kishore, and Kishore said that you're like this, so I'm going to believe it. And now I'm not friends with either one of you. And that's how we treat God. We're like, I had it out with this person and this person and this person. He's like, but that's a pope. We didn't even speak. You and I didn't even speak. It's like, yeah, but the pope said so, and so now I can't talk to you anymore. And as a person who grew up with no friends and having people say that, like, to them, it does number on you. And so I always like to flip my perspective and think, when have I been doing that to my friend? Like, have I been doing that to God? So for me, it is really about establishing that trust that Krishna's never going to leave me stranded. And things might look tough, but I have to trust that Krishna is directing my life in a certain way. If I have really, like you said, laid the cards out on the table and said, I'm giving this life to you, then do I trust Krishna with it?
I appreciate the trusting that you're bringing up, and trusting in the good things, because that's, I think, what Krishna is asking us to do in this verse. The idea of that, just don't worry about following another's path, but if you just follow the path, your own path, walk your own journey, everything's going to work out for you. It may not necessarily look the way you or other people think it's supposed to look materially, but actually, like, you're safe. And I've got you, and I'm with you, and I'm here for you. And so I really, really appreciate that invitation to trust, that invitation to believe the best, that invitation to. I once heard, in and when people get married, it's very common that they'll read from the book of, I believe it's the book of Ecclesiastes. I'm not sure. I'm not a biblical reference, but I think it's somewhere. But the idea, like, love is patient, love is kind, love believes all things. Love is, I think, trusting. I think it believes all things. The idea that it always trusts. And the idea, I heard somebody speaking about that once, and it was really beautiful in the context of of love always believes the best. Like, where does my mind go when someone's late, for example? Do I immediately think like they're disrespecting me, or do I assume that maybe they have a good, Corinthians, I think probably. Do I immediately go to like God hates me, or God's looking out for me? Like, where does my mind go in terms of believing the best versus assuming the worst? And so what I'm hearing is an invitation to believe the best, and to trust the good things that happen to us, and that good things can and will happen to us. So I appreciate that a lot. And now we're going to turn it over to Kimberly as we come to our time. Should we turn it over, Kimberly, for some takeaways? What you got for us?
Thank you. We're taking away that our relationship with Krishna is extremely unique, and we're being warned by him that it's dangerous not to be ourselves. And we can believe in Krishna in all circumstances. We're always guided and will never be left stranded. Love always believes in the best.
Thank you. Some closing words, Chuta, Kishore?
I'm going with that one because I cannot tell you how many times I have had conversations with friends, people, any of my relationships. There comes a point when, something will happen and they're like, oh, but but then I thought that you were going to do so and so. I'm like, but don't you know me? You know me. You know I'd never do so and so. And I want to flip that script and have that conversation with Krishna. The innumerable times I start to blame God for all of the things, and I feel like he's like, but you know me. Do you know me? You know I'd never do this to you. You know me. And I wanna give my friend the benefit of the doubt. I wanna know my friend.
Beautiful.
I think I'm walking away with just reminding, like just being more real with myself, like this question of like, am I really taking shelter? Am I really believing and trusting in this relationship with God? Because I think there's a difference between saying I do and acting like I do and doing all the things that everyone else is doing to show that like we do. I think there's a difference between all of that and like really an internal, like that unique relationship with Krishna, like an internal conversation that we're having with Krishna that only you know about, So I think I'm walking away with that reminder of just like, how much am I turning towards God today as opposed to turning away from God?
I am walking away with the trust that my life is going the way it's supposed to. That I'm just at every step seeking Krishna's, finding. I think somebody in the chat wrote, it was Baldevi, about look for the gift. I think look for Krishna's hand. Just look for Krishna's hand. Look for Krishna's hand. And as long as I remember that I'm walking alongside Krishna, as Achyuta was saying, with my friend, then I'm in good hands and I'm doing okay. And keep that close. Keep that close. Okay, guys, that's it. We did it. Another day in the books. Love you guys. Grateful for all of you. Thank you so much for tuning in, everybody. And we will see you again. Sorry, let me try it again. We will see you again next time. Same time, same place. Bye-bye, everybody.